So we're talking about all the ways in which God speaks to us and how he reveals himself to us and how that helps us, right? It helps us understand his will and his way for our lives as we live interacting with him as God, but also interacting in the world that he has made. And so a couple of weeks ago, we talked about what theologians call general revelation, that God communicates to us in part. He reveals himself to us in part through creation, all that's been created, and then also our conscience as well, right? That kind of ancient word in our soul that we know the ways of God. We know what's right and what's wrong in our conscience. And then last week we talked about what's called special revelation, how God speaks to us through the scriptures, through his written word in the Bible. And we said that general revelation is God speaking to everyone everywhere, regardless of what you believe, right? So we know that every week people come into this place, our friends, our neighbors that don't know God, they don't maybe even believe in a God, and yet they're curious about something, they're looking for something. And we would say God has spoken to you through creation, but then that the Bible is specifically for those that would be in covenant relationship with God. God's voice that goes out in his scriptures to his people. And so then this week, here's what we're doing. We're just kind of building off of the foundation that we've set, and we're moving on into like prophecy here in a couple of weeks and hearing God's still small voice. Like we're building this kind of theology of hearing God's voice. And so this week is what we call providence. We're going to talk about the doctrine of God's providence. And God's providence is his governing guidance in the world in which he has created. Right, so in his general revelation, in his creation, that God has made all things, his providence is his guiding and governance over all that he has made. And so we're going to talk about that, but then here's the key. We're also going to talk about how, as God's covenant people, we can actually discern what God is doing in all of that. That we can hear the voice of God in all the ways in which he is moving, in all the ways in which he is doing all things. Right, so we ask questions all the time, like, what college should I go to? Should I marry this girl? Should I not? Should I take this job? Should I take that job? We ask kind of all these kind of life questions, and unless God writes it on the wall, we're not really sure what to do. Which, by the way, he's only done one time, and it was to tell the king of Babylon that he was going to die, okay? So that may not be the way that you want God to communicate to you, okay? So don't ask him to write it on a wall. And we ask these questions and we wonder what God would want for us. And in a lot of ways, the providence is his way of communicating to you the ways in which he wants you to go. And so here's what we're gonna do. This is kind of a two-part sermon because there's so much here. So this week, I'm gonna talk about providence and apply it a little bit, okay? Kind of high-level application. And then next week, we're gonna talk way more practically about discerning God's will for our lives and what that looks like and how we can hear God's voice through all that he's doing, okay? So the doctrine of God's providence, it was defined in the 16th century Heidelberg Catechism in this way. I think it's helpful. Question 27 asks, what is the providence of God? And this was their answer. It is the almighty and everywhere present power of God, whereby, as it were, by his hand, he still upholds heaven and earth with all creatures, and so governs them that herbs and grass, rain and drought, fruitful and barren years, meat and drink, amen? Meat and drink, health and sickness, riches and poverty. Yea, all things come not by chance, but by his fatherly word. That is a great definition of providence. In fact, the very word providence defines itself. If you break it down into provide, it literally means to see to. God sees everything and he sees to everything happening. He's going to make it happen. He's going to see to it. He's got it, right? He's got it. God sees what we can't see, and what God sees, he sees too. That he's gonna provide whatever is necessary to accomplish his plans and purposes for the world. And how does he do it? Well, this is interesting. He just tells it to. Right? By his very word, just like he created all things, he sees to the creation of all things. Isaiah 55 verse 11 says, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. So God speaks and it's done, right? God summons and it happens. God decrees and whatever he wanted to take place takes place because he just speaks it. And so then the question for us in terms of our series, knowing God's voice, is how do we hear what God sees? How do we discern what God is seeing too, what he is providing for, what he is doing? Like if God is summoning 10,000 things in your life right now, this just symphony of glory and grace, if he's orchestrating 10,000 things right now, how do we discern the music? What does he say? What is he saying? What is he asking of us? What is he doing? If everything that happens in the providence of God and according to his purpose, how do we hear his guidance? And how do we trust in what he's doing? How do we hear what God sees? That's our question for us. And the answer is going to be found in the same place that we discern all the ways in which God speaks. Okay, so this is just going to be something you hear me say throughout the rest of our time in this series, but all the other ways in which God speaks is best discerned by the scriptures. All right, what he has clearly said, the heart of God, the language of God's heart is found in the scriptures, and every other way in which he might communicate to us is going to be best understood and discerned through the Bible, right? Whether it's a prophetic word, a dream, a vision, however it is that God is speaking to us, we're going to be able to best interpret and understand what it means in his special revelation in the Word of God. So we're gonna have lots of Bible verses today, okay? We're gonna do lots of Bible. In fact, keep your thumb in Acts 17 where we read, and I want you to turn all the way back to Genesis 50, first book of the Bible, last chapter in Genesis. Here's what's happening in context. You've got Joseph, right? You got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Jacob's favorite son was Joseph. Just quick aside, I think sometimes we read the Bible and we don't realize that some aspects of the Bible are just the Bible telling a story about what's happening, and it's not prescriptive, it's descriptive. So don't read the story of Joseph and be like, I should have a favorite son too. Having favorite kids is not a good thing, okay? So Joseph is Jacob's favorite, and he gets the cool jacket, right, from his dad, and he has this dream when he's younger that his whole family is bowing down to him. So they hate him. His brothers sell him into slavery. He ends up in jail, but God's hand is upon him. God's providential hand is upon him, and he ends up basically ruling Egypt next to Pharaoh. And there's a huge famine in the land, and God gives Joseph wisdom, and through Joseph's wisdom, Egypt is able to store a bunch of food. And so Joseph's family, this is decades later, go to Egypt to find food. Okay, to get food. And so they're meeting with Joseph here at the end of the book of Genesis, and here's what Joseph tells them about what he experienced. Genesis 50, verse 20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. What you meant for evil, right, brothers, what you meant to do as harm, as evil, you sold me into slavery. What you meant for evil, God in his providence, as he orchestrates 10,000 things, was doing that for good, right? To bring it about, to see to. Right, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So in the providence of God, he orchestrated all these moments to bring about this moment. All of these moments, even you being evil towards me, God was bringing this about for this very moment right here. He did this, he purposed this. Right, so they meant evil, which means, we'll talk about this more later, we do have meaningful choices. Right? We make meaningful decisions, that our choices actually matter. You meant evil, we're responsible for the choices that we make, but in the whole of it, right, outside of what you were doing, God was meaning for good. So even evil and suffering falls under the providence of God. Even through evil and suffering, God is carrying out his providential plan. I was thinking about this. So you and I are here in this moment right now because of one of the greatest genocides in human history. My people, the Armenian people, they were systematically destroyed by the Ottoman Empire over the course of a few years, about 100 years ago. And so a few of the Armenians, they fled. Pretty much all I know that is here in America are the Essens, me, and the Kardashians, so you're welcome. Right, so you've got the Paradox Church now, and you've got Chloe, right, and Kim. But my great-grandfather fled to the States, okay? He meets my great-grandmother, and they open up a hotel in downtown Detroit, and then they have a bunch of kids, and the kids actually lived in the lower floor of the hotel, and one of those kids is my grandfather, and then he meets my grandmother, and they have 13 children. One of those is my dad, and so then my dad meets my mom, and they have me and two other siblings, and then I meet my wife Heather. Like I'm far away from the Lord at the time, but God is starting to draw me back and call me back, and we just kind of have this sense and vision and hope that we were gonna, like, Jesus was gonna be everything for us, and that he was actually gonna do ministry through us. And so then years later, we start the Paradox Church, and here we are. Like, we're in this place, right? We're in this place because, like, God used the Armenian genocide probably in 10,000 ways, but one of the ways in which he used the Armenian genocide is that we would be in this place right now at this time together. God is using evil and suffering to bring about his plans and his purposes in my life and in yours. Right? So God's providence is over evil and suffering. Now turn back to Acts 17, our text. Acts 17, great. I love this whole section here. The Apostle Paul, he's in the city of Athens, and they invite him to speak at the Areopagus. Athens was the intellectual center of the world at the time. It's where Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, they had birthed Greek philosophy. And the Areopagus is the place that you would go to discuss philosophy and religion and even political matters and all of that. So he gets invited there, and he's there with a bunch of people that don't believe in the God of the Bible. Right? They're agnostic, they're atheists, they're pluralists, they believe in, all kinds of gods. They don't believe in the God of the Bible, and so he doesn't start with the Bible. He doesn't start with God's words in the Bible. He starts with God's words in creation and God's words in providence. He's explaining to them the one true God and his voice in those other ways, not through the scriptures. And so in like verse 27 or verse 25, he says, he himself gives to all mankind life, breath, and everything. Right? That he provides all things. Right? That he provides, he sees to. And then verse 26, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods, circle that, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, circle that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, yet he is actually not far from each one of us. So in God's providence, he determines our allotted periods. So right? When we are here, right? When we live, when we're where we are, he has determined when. And then also the boundaries of our dwelling place, so where we live. So when and where we live has been predetermined by God, providentially put in place by God, okay? So listen, some of you have questions. You are wondering if you should move. Right? Is God calling me to move? Is God calling me to take this job? Am I supposed to go do this thing? And you're praying about it, and you're wondering about it, and you're wondering what God would have for you. And listen, I don't know. I don't know God's will for you in that decision. I'm not sure, but if you're here right now, it's because it's his will that you would be here right now. That this moment right now is not an accident, that you here in Fort Worth, Texas, 2022, that is something that he is doing. He's saying something to you in that he has purposed this moment for you, and there's something that God is doing in this moment. God is saying something about where you are and when, and right now is not an accident. So evil and suffering under the providential hand of God. Where you are and when you are under the providential hand of God. Last one, turn to Ephesians chapter 1. Ephesians 1, turn to your right. One of the great letters of the Bible, written to a church, about the church. And in Ephesians chapter 1, you've got this extremely long run-on sentence from verses 3, I think, all the way to 14. He finally found a period in the Greek anyways. And so you have this just great just truth about all that we have in Christ. So in verse 3, he's saying that we have been given every spiritual blessing. God's provided every spiritual blessing in Christ. In Ephesians chapter 1, verse 5, he says, this is according to the purpose of his will. He's doing all this according to the purpose of his will. But then verse 11 is the one that I wanted us to see. Verse 11, in him, in Jesus, we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who listens, who works all things according to the counsel of his will. So God is working all things according to the counsel of his will. So he's not asking for anybody's advice. He's just saying, what do I want to do? Right? God's like, what do I want to do? And this is what I want to do. Okay, I'm going to work everything then to accomplish what I want to do. But it's all things. That's what I want. He works all things. So it's big things, evil, suffering, where and when you live, but it's small things too that God is working. He's working all things, seemingly spiritual things and seemingly unspiritual things, big things, small things. God is working everything, and everything that happens according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. Literally everything that's happening in your life is being overseen by God that he might carry out his purposes in the world and in your life as well. I'll just give you some examples. Proverbs 16:33. The lot is cast into the lap, but the decision is wholly from the Lord. Right? The roll of the dice, God oversees. 1 Kings 17:4, I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. I told the birds to do something and they did it. Jonah 4:6, the Lord God appointed a plant and it made it come up over Jonah. He's like, I want a plant to grow right there. Go. And it does. Exodus 8:21, I will send swarms of flies on you and your servants. Okay? Psalm 105:16, he summoned a famine on the land and broke all supply of bread. Psalm 105:34, he spoke and locusts came. Daniel 2, verse 21, he removes kings and sets up kings. Hebrews 1:3, he upholds the universe by the word of his power. Everything, big and small, spiritual and seemingly unspiritual, God tells it to do something and it happens. God is orchestrating 10,000 things in your life right now, right? This symphony of joy and sorrow for his glory and for your good. What do we do with all of that? What do we do with that? If that's true, if the Bible is just clearly, and I've got like 20 more verses for us, and I could pick another 20 if we needed to. If this is true, that God is governing and guiding the universe towards his purpose and end, what do we do? Right? If God sees to his plans and purposes being fulfilled, then how do we hear what God sees? We're gonna talk way more practically about it next week, but just 3 kind of high-level ways in which we can hear what God sees, in which we can discern God's voice through his work of providence. 1, providence is sometimes God shouting in our suffering. Providence is sometimes God shouting in our suffering. C.S. Lewis famously said, God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks in our consciences, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Yeah, see, one obvious kind of resistance that you're gonna have in your heart when we talk about the providence of God is gonna be the reality of evil and suffering, right? If God is over all things, if he purposes all things, plans all things, if nothing is happening outside of the hand of God, then how does he allow evil and suffering in our lives? And we've talked about this, literally dozens of times over the years at the church. And so let me just hit on one thing here. here's one thing that God is saying in all of this. God is saying that there is purpose in our suffering, that there's purpose in it. See, actually, suffering is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Purposeless suffering is. Suffering is not the worst. It's that it would mean nothing. Right? The worst thing in the world would be that God was not over suffering and couldn't do anything to stop it and wasn't doing anything in it. And it was just purposeless suffering that you were facing. Purposeless suffering that you had to endure. Purposeless suffering that we had to go through. But if there's purpose in it, then maybe it means something. And so we don't waste our suffering because there's purpose in it. And the Bible does not apologize for what this means, that God is ordaining suffering in your life for his purposes. You have verses like Proverbs 16:4, the Lord has made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble. Or Job, he's questioning God about his suffering, right? Job faced some legit suffering. And then at the end of the book of Job, he finally repents and he says, I know that you can do all things and there's no purpose of yours that can be thwarted. Or you've got Zechariah in chapter 8 where God is saying, as I purposed to bring disaster to you when your fathers provoked me, I did not relent, says the Lord of hosts. So again, I am purposing in these days to bring good to you. Right? God's purpose for us is that we would be conformed into the image of Jesus. And so what suffering does is it repurposes us. It reorients us. It makes us hit pause on life. It reminds us that maybe we've handled holy things too loosely, or that we've lost sight of God, we've forgotten God. It repurposes us towards the goal of being fashioned into the image of Jesus. And so you have these wonderful truths in the Bible. Romans 8:28, we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. Why? Because it's for those who are called according to his purpose. Or Psalm 57, the psalmist is crying out, he's lamenting, he's praying. He says, oh God, in you my soul takes refuge. Till the storms of destruction, all of my sufferings would pass. I cry out to you, God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose in me. Or Psalm 138, though I walk in the midst of trouble, you preserve my life. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. I've told you this before because I just love it. Pastor that I love, Thabiti Anyuile. He said, when suffering knocks at your door, invite it in, make it your slave, and demand that it produces in you what it was meant to. That suffering, it repurposes us. It's God getting our attention sometimes and reminding us that God is God. Second, providence is God saying that we still make meaningful choices. We still make meaningful choices. Now, this is just kind of a biblical and cosmic reality that we have to hold in tension, because the Bible holds it in tension, and it's this, that God is over all things, and yet our decisions and our choices matter, okay? They still matter. So I'll give you some examples. Same story, Joseph and his brothers, but in Genesis 45. Joseph has first kind of revealed himself to his brothers, and he says this. He says, and now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. You sold me here, but it was God who sent me before you to preserve life. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. Right? So in the same breath, Joseph is like, you sent me here. Thanks, guys. Right? Thanks a lot. And yet it was God who sent me here. Right? You sent me here. You're responsible for that choice, but over it, governing over that, was God carrying out his purposes. Or Jesus talking about his betrayal at the Last Supper, Luke 22. Jesus says, for the Son of Man goes as it has been determined. Right? So this was the plan. This has been determined, but woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. So Judas, like, this was the plan of God. You are working in the plan of God, and yet you're responsible for your decision to betray me. And then you have Peter preaching a sermon to the religious leaders that had killed Jesus in Acts 2. Same idea. He says, this Jesus, delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, this was God's plan, you crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. This was God's plan, but you killed him. This was what he had purposed, but your decision, you're responsible for that. You made that choice. That was a meaningful choice that you made. And I could bring up dozens of verses of God working through our good things, right? These are bad things. But God works through our prayers. He works through our evangelism. He works through our good deeds. The point is that our choices, they matter. Right? Our choices matter. People look at Providence and they learn about it, they're like, oh, okay, so, kind of like my decisions maybe don't matter. God's gonna do it, and everything that he does is gonna be really great. And we'll say things like, when God closes the door, he opens a window, right? That's kind of the way in which we define providence. And it becomes this kind of pious sounding, over spiritualized, let go and let God kind of thing. And that's not what's happening here. Right? An open door might not necessarily mean that you should walk through it. It might be a good opportunity, but it might not be the right timing. It might be an opportunity that God has put before you, and you pray about it, and you seek wise counsel, and you seek out the heart of God, and you wonder about what you even want to do, and it might actually be galvanizing your call to where you are right now. It might just be a reinvigoration of, no, I'm called to be at this work or at this place or to do this thing. Even though there's this open door before me, actually it was just meant for me to just galvanize what I am already called to. A closed door might not mean that he doesn't want you to walk through it. It might mean that he wants you to keep knocking. A closed door might mean that he wants you to pray more. A closed door means he wants you to keep asking. Right? We don't build our life on bumper sticker theology. The universe is way more nuanced than that, and there's a complexity to life that bumper sticker theology isn't helpful, right? Isn't helpful for. Okay? So God's not closing a door and opening a window all the time. He may open a window so you can throw out pious sounding fake Bible verses like cleanliness is next to godliness, and God will never give you more than you can handle, things like that. Throw those out the window. Providence, it provides the context in which the word of Scripture and the wisdom of the Spirit can be applied, okay? Our choices still matter. We still have meaningful choices. Now, that doesn't mean that we have complete free will, okay? I don't like the language of free will. You don't have free will to do whatever you want. You've got the providence of God who may not let you, and then there's these limitations in the providence of God that keep us from total free autonomy in the way in which you might think about it, right? There's limitations based on our nature. You can't just fly away, right? You just can't do that. He didn't make you to do that. There's limitations based on other people's meaningful choices that they want to make. Other people have meaningful choices too, and so you can't just do whatever you want. I'll give you an example. So a couple of years ago, my wife and I were watching the fireworks show, right, on July 4th. And this was the first time, we've been married almost 19 years, this is the first time that she told me, she said, I thought you were going to propose to me during a fireworks show. So back when I was playing baseball on Friday nights, they would do fireworks shows after the game, and we would always watch them together and hold hands, and and she's like, this would be a great time for him to propose to me, and so she's like, I thought you were going to propose to me at the fireworks show, and I was feeling a little bit like insecure at this point. I was like, dang, I missed out on an opportunity, and I was like, baby, our whole marriage has been fireworks, and and so I didn't do that. What I did was we went to, and I think this is sweet, we went to Trinity Park, and we played our favorite Tony Bennett song, and we danced, and I dropped to a knee. But here's the point. God never told me to marry Heather. He didn't write it on a wall. He didn't give me a dream, a vision. He never told me to marry Heather. God spoke. I knew that it was God's plan that I marry Heather because she said yes. She made a meaningful choice, and she said yes. Like, you can't go up to a girl and say, God told me to marry you, right? Because if God didn't tell her, then you didn't hear him right. You didn't hear him. So we make meaningful choices, but those are limited by other people's meaningful choices. Those are limited by nature. If you're 5'6", God is probably telling you you're not going to play professional basketball, right? If you want to be an astronaut, but you're not very smart, then you probably aren't supposed to be an astronaut, okay? That's providence. So our choices matter, but they still fall under the providential hand of God. God is orchestrating in your life 10,000 things, and yet at the same time, your choices matter. Lastly, providence is God encouraging us to take risks for his glory. Providence is God encouraging us to take risks for his glory. Gosh, like so much of the American church, and I know in a lot of ways this isn't us, right? For one thing, we're in very uncomfortable chairs in a very uncomfortable place, but so much of the American church is sitting in comfortable chairs at a comfortable church, listening to a pastor preach a comfortable sermon while we drink coffee, and then we go home and we get into our comfortable cars, we drive home to our comfortable house and live a comfortable life absent of anything and avoiding anything that is uncomfortable. And the doctrine of God's providence, him orchestrating 10,000 things, is not that you would be comfortable. It is not. This is not a symphony of God's glory and grace that you would be safe. It's that we would take risks for his glory, that we'd be a part of all that he's doing, we'd be a part of his plans and purposes for the universe, for what he's doing in the world. Right? The God of the universe is in control of everything, and he's working intricately in your life. Right? He's been doing all of these things to bring you to this moment so that you might join him in something and do something. Right? He's working for your glory or for your good and his glory so that you would get after it and take part in what he's doing. Christians don't fear failure because we fear God. We don't fear people because we fear God. And we have this freedom now, knowing that he's in control, to take risks. Now, I don't mean that we do things foolish or we make dumb choices, but if you're consistently and constantly making decisions based on comfort and not Christ, I don't think we're hearing God well as his voice goes out in providence. As one author said, Christians have been gripped by providence and they have built hospitals, ended slave trades, founded orphanages, launched reformations, and pierced the darkness of unreached people groups. And so let us not be found just watching Netflix, but doing something, right? Taking risks. God rules over galaxies and governments. The winds and the waves obey him, and he's over every little detail in our lives. And so we can go forward with confidence and just do something, right? Marry the girl, start the business, plant the church, do the ministry, go talk to that random person, move your family to an unreached people group. Go, because God is communicating to us in his providence that we should take risks. Everyone's looking for depth and meaning and beauty in life, and God's providence is saying, here's a life of depth and meaning and beauty. Like, it's okay to fail, and it's okay to make the wrong choice, and everything's gonna be okay here. Go. Jesus is on the throne, the risen Christ, our conquering hero, and he rules and reigns over all things. And there are promises that we can cling to that free us up to make risky choices sometimes. There's promises. Romans 8 says nothing will separate you from his love. That the most uncomfortable thing you've ever experienced is being separated from God, and Jesus took care of that. And there's nothing that you can do, there's no choice that you can make that's going to separate you from his love. You think you're gonna go start the business or start the ministry and God's gonna be like, what are you doing? Now I don't love you, you didn't follow my will. No. He's saying, go. Be freed up. You realize how free Christians are? To live is Christ, to die is gain, the Apostle Paul says. If I live, it's for Christ. If they kill me for what I do, I just get to be with Christ. That's freedom. So there's freedom, there's so much freedom when you understand the doctrine of providence. The hospitals, the schools, the missionaries, all of that is started by Christians who understand that God is in control, that God is orchestrating this symphony, that God is providentially governing and guiding the universe, including your life, big things and small things, spiritual things and things that don't even seem spiritual. And so we can go, we can be free. So he communicates this to us. And all that he's doing. Right, think about the 10,000 things that are happening in your life right now. You probably can't. And yet there's 10,000 things going on, the people that you've interacted with, all the ways in which you got to this moment, your story, your abilities, your spiritual gifts, the group that you have right now, the church that you have right now, the city that you're in right now. God has orchestrated that and said, I want you to go. Make much of me. Love your neighbor. Let's go. But where do you want to go, God? We'll talk more about that way. There's ways of doing that. There's ways of discerning that. There's ways of praying. But we got to go. We cannot be paralyzed by providence. Providence frees us up to trust in Christ, to trust that there's nothing that we can do that would affect our relationship with God, and that's the thing that matters. And it frees us up to just go.